"You have no future, Ethan. I do not know how much longer I can pretend everything is fine." Those were the words my wife said to me while we stood in our kitchen on a quiet Tuesday evening. And I remember the way the room suddenly felt different. Not because she had raised her voice. Not because we were having a dramatic argument. It was because the person I had spent years building a life with had finally said out loud what she had been thinking for a long time. My name is Ethan Carter, and for most people looking from the outside, my life probably seemed ordinary. I was 45 years old, living in a comfortable neighborhood outside Chicago, working quietly, and staying away from the spotlight. I did not have a corner office with my name on the door. I did not attend expensive business events every week. I did not constantly talk about my achievements. To my wife Claire, those things mattered. Claire had built a successful career through determination and ambition. She was respected inside her company, known for making difficult decisions, and surrounded by people who constantly reminded her of her value. I was proud of her. I always had been. But somewhere along the way, the difference between our lives became a distance between us. She started seeing my quiet personality as a lack of ambition. She saw my simple routine as proof that I was standing still. What she did not see were the years I spent learning, studying, and preparing. She did not see the conversations with business owners who asked for my advice. She did not see the projects I helped behind the scenes. She did not understand that I never measured success by how many people knew my name. That evening, Claire looked at me with a tired expression and told me she was worried about our future. She said she needed a partner who was moving forward, someone who had bigger goals and clearer achievements. I listened quietly because I knew arguing would not change how she felt. Sometimes people do not need more explanations. Sometimes they need time to see the truth for themselves. "Claire," I said calmly, "you are judging my life based on what you can see. But there is a lot you do not know." She shook her head slightly. "Ethan, I have known you for years." Her words were not cruel. That almost made them harder to accept. She truly believed she understood me. She believed she had seen everything. But she had only seen the parts one chose to show. After that conversation, I went into my home office and looked through the documents I had collected over the years. Business reports, market research, strategy notes, plans I had developed but never needed to share. I had always believed the right moment would come when my knowledge could actually make a difference. I never expected that moment would arrive because my own wife had stopped believing in me. The next morning, while Claire prepared for another important day at her company, I received a message that would change everything. It was from someone I had not spoken to in months. A person with a position powerful enough to influence the future of an entire organization. The message was short, but it carried a meaning I immediately understood. They needed my help, and they had no idea that the person they were looking for was the same man someone had just said had no future. The message I received that morning was simple, but I knew it carried the weight of something much bigger. "Ethan, I need to speak with you about a serious business matter. Are you available today?" It was from Daniel Brooks, the CEO of a company that Claire had dedicated years of her life to building. I stared at the screen for a few moments because the timing was impossible to ignore. Just hours earlier, my own wife had questioned whether I had any direction in life. Now, one of the most respected business leaders in Chicago was asking for my help. I did not feel satisfaction or excitement. I felt responsibility. I knew this was not about proving Claire wrong. It was not about showing her that she had underestimated me. It was about deciding whether my experience could genuinely help people facing a difficult situation. After replying to Daniel, I spent the next few hours reviewing information I already had about the company. I knew their industry well. I understood the challenges businesses faced when markets changed faster than their strategies. Companies often believed they needed dramatic solutions, but sometimes the answer was hidden inside the systems they already had. I had learned that through years of observation and quiet work. My approach was never to enter a room and pretend I was the smartest person there. The best solutions usually came from listening first. Meanwhile, Claire was preparing for another demanding day at her company. She moved through the morning routine with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. She reviewed emails, checked reports, and prepared for meetings. Watching her, I remembered why I admired her. She was hardworking, focused, and committed to what she built. My disappointment from the night before did not erase the respect I had for her. But it did remind me how easily two people could stop seeing each other clearly. Before leaving, Claire paused near the front door. Are you going to spend another day working from home? She asked. Her question was not meant to hurt me, but I noticed the assumption behind it. She still believed my work was somehow less important because it looked different from hers. Actually, I have a meeting today, I replied. She looked surprised for a moment. With who? She asked. I simply answered, someone who needs my perspective. I could see curiosity in her expression, but she did not ask more questions. She left for work, unaware that her own company was about to enter a conversation that would change how everyone viewed me. Later that afternoon, I met Daniel Brooks at a private office downtown. He was professional, direct, and clearly concerned about the future of the company. He explained that they had reached a difficult point. Their previous strategies were no longer producing the same results, and the leadership team needed a fresh perspective. He told me that several advisors had offered opinions, but none had identified the deeper issue. I listened carefully as he described the situation. Then I asked a few questions. Simple questions that revealed details others had overlooked. Daniel noticed immediately. That is exactly why I wanted to meet with you, he said. You are looking at the problem differently. For the first time in a long time, someone was not judging me by what they could see. They were recognizing what I could contribute. And what Daniel did not know was that the person he trusted for answers was the same person Claire believed had no future. When I left Daniel Brooks's office that afternoon, I knew something important had changed. Not because I had suddenly gained recognition or because someone powerful had finally noticed me. The truth was much simpler. For the first time in years, I was standing in a situation where my experience mattered. I had spent so much time working quietly that people had forgotten there was a difference between being invisible and being unsuccessful. The two were not the same. Over the next few days, Daniel invited me to review more information about the company. I studied their reports, listened to their leadership concerns, and examined the decisions that brought them to this point. The more I learned, the clearer the problem became. The company did not have a shortage of talented people. They had smart executives, dedicated employees, and valuable products. The challenge was that they were moving based on old assumptions while the market around them was changing. I had seen this pattern many times before. A company could be full of talented individuals and still struggle if everyone was looking at the same problem from the same angle. What they needed was not someone to replace their team. They needed someone who could help them see what they had been missing. During one meeting with Daniel and several senior leaders, I explained my observations. I did not criticize their previous decisions because every choice had been made with the information they had at the time. Instead, I focused on what they could do next. I suggested improvements in their operations, customer strategy, and long-term planning. I explained that the company's greatest strength was already inside the organization. They simply needed to reconnect with it. The room became quiet as everyone reviewed the information I presented. I noticed executives exchanging looks, not because they disagreed, but because they were considering ideas they had not discussed before. Daniel leaned back in his chair and smiled. This is the perspective we have been missing, he said. Those words stayed with me because they reminded me why I had always worked the way I did. Real value did not come from being the loudest person in the room. It came from understanding problems deeply enough to create meaningful solutions. Later that evening, I returned home and found Claire sitting at the kitchen table reviewing company documents. She looked exhausted. I could tell the pressure from work was affecting her, even though she tried not to show it. For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to explain that Daniel had asked for my help and that her company was facing challenges I could help solve. But I stopped myself. I did not want this moment to become about proving a point. I wanted Claire to understand me naturally, not because I forced her to see something she was not ready to accept. "How was your day?" she asked. I looked at her and answered honestly. "It was interesting." She smiled slightly. "Mine was stressful. We are dealing with some difficult issues at the office." I listened carefully. Then she mentioned that the leadership team was searching for new ideas and outside perspectives. I remained quiet because I knew something she did not. The person her company was searching for was already sitting across from her every night. And soon, everyone would discover that the man they underestimated had been preparing for this moment all along. The following week changed the way I looked at everything. Before, I had always been someone working quietly in the background, solving problems without needing anyone to know my name. But now, I was sitting across from the leadership team of a major company, discussing decisions that could shape their future. What surprised me most was not the responsibility. It was the realization that the same people who once overlooked quiet people like me were now searching for exactly that kind of perspective. Daniel Brooks continued arranging meetings with different departments, and I spent my time understanding every part of the business. I spoke with managers, reviewed processes, and listened to employees who had worked there for years. I wanted to understand the company beyond numbers and reports. A business was never just a collection of financial statements. It was made of people, ideas, and decisions made every day. During one meeting, a senior executive questioned whether my approach was realistic. He was respectful, but he was used to traditional methods and believed the company needed a faster, more aggressive strategy. I understood his concern. Change always created uncertainty. Instead of arguing, I asked him to explain the reasons behind his position. After listening, I showed him how my strategy could address those concerns while creating a more stable path forward. Slowly, the room shifted. People were no longer defending their old ideas. They were exploring new possibilities. Daniel noticed the change and later told me something I would remember. Ethan, the reason people are listening is because you are not trying to replace their experience. You are helping them use it better. That was exactly what I believed. The strongest leaders did not walk into a room trying to prove they were smarter than everyone else. They helped people see what they could achieve together. Meanwhile, Claire was beginning to notice changes at work. She heard conversations about new ideas being discussed by the leadership team. She saw executives becoming more optimistic about the future. But she still did not know the person behind those changes was me. One evening, she came home later than usual and sat across from me at dinner. "Something interesting is happening at the office," she said. "Daniel brought in someone who seems to understand the problems better than anyone expected." I looked at her and asked, "Really?" She nodded. "Yes. Apparently, this person has a completely different way of looking at the company." I listened as she described the impact my suggestions were already having. There was something almost ironic about hearing my own work explained to me by my wife without her realizing it was mine. But I did not interrupt. I wanted the truth to arrive at the right time. The next morning, Daniel called me and asked me to attend an important executive meeting. He explained that several major decisions needed to be discussed, and he wanted me there when the leadership team reviewed the next stage of the plan. Before hanging up, he added one sentence that made me realize how quickly things were changing. "Ethan, tomorrow everyone in that room will understand why we contacted you." I looked out the window of my home office after the call ended. Just days earlier, Claire believed I had no clear future. Now, her entire company was preparing to hear what I had been quietly building toward for years. And the most surprising part was that Claire was about to discover the truth at the same time as everyone else. The morning of the executive meeting arrived, and I could feel that this was going to be a turning point. I arrived at the company headquarters earlier than expected because I wanted time to review my notes and understand the people I would be speaking with. I had never believed that preparation was about trying to appear smarter than others. Preparation was about respecting the opportunity and the people involved. When I entered the conference room, I saw Daniel Brooks already there with several members of the leadership team. They greeted me professionally, but I could sense their curiosity. They had heard about the ideas I shared, but most of them had never worked with me before. A few minutes later, Claire walked into the room. The moment she saw me sitting at the table, she stopped. For a second, she looked confused, as if she was trying to understand why I was there. I could see the questions forming in her expression. Why was her husband sitting in a meeting with executives? Why was Daniel treating me like someone whose opinion mattered? Daniel noticed her reaction, but simply smiled. "Claire, I think you will find today's discussion interesting," he said. The meeting began, and Daniel explained the challenges facing the company. He talked about the changing market, increased competition, and the need for a strategy that could protect the company while creating new opportunities. Then he turned to me. "Ethan, would you share your thoughts?" I looked around the room before speaking. I knew this was the moment when everything could change, but I did not want to approach it with pride. I wanted to approach it with purpose. I explained that the company's biggest challenge was not a lack of talent. They had experienced leaders and hardworking employees. The real issue was that they were making decisions based on the success of the past instead of preparing for the future. I shared several observations from my research and explained how small strategic adjustments could create significant improvements. I discussed customer relationships, operational efficiency, and ways to make the company more adaptable. As I spoke, the room became completely focused. Executives who had initially been uncertain started asking detailed questions. They wanted to understand how these ideas could be implemented. Daniel listened carefully, occasionally looking around the room as people began seeing the possibilities. Claire remained quiet. I could tell she was processing everything. She was watching the same person she had questioned just days earlier speak with confidence in a room full of professionals. But what mattered to me was not her surprise. What mattered was that the conversation was helping the company move forward. After the meeting, several executives stayed behind to discuss the next steps. They thanked me for the perspective I provided and asked if I would continue working with them. I accepted because I believed in the potential of the company and the people inside it. Later that afternoon, Claire approached me near the elevators. For a moment, she simply looked at me. "Ethan," she said quietly, "how long have you been doing this?" I understood what she was really asking. She was not asking about business strategy. She was asking how long I had been carrying a part of myself that she never noticed. "A long time," I answered. She looked away, thinking about everything she had learned. The truth was finally becoming clear. I had never lacked a future. I had simply been building one that nobody else could see. After the executive meeting, I expected things to move quickly inside the company, but I did not expect the change in attitude to happen so suddenly. The same people who had been uncertain about my involvement were now asking for my opinion, requesting my analysis, and inviting me into conversations that shaped the future of the business. I appreciated their trust, but I also understood something important. Respect was not created by one successful meeting. It was created through consistency, honesty, and the ability to deliver results over time. Daniel Brooks continued working closely with me during the following weeks. Together, we reviewed the company's progress and adjusted the strategy based on new information. I spent time with different teams, listening to their concerns and understanding their daily challenges. The more I learned about the company, the more I realized that the employees were the foundation of its success. They did not need someone to come in and tell them everything they had done wrong. They needed someone who could help them recognize the opportunities they already had. This approach changed the atmosphere inside the organization. People became more open about sharing ideas. Departments that had rarely communicated began working together more effectively. Small improvements started creating noticeable results. Daniel told me that the company finally felt like it had direction again. But while the business was changing, something even more personal was happening at home. Claire had become quieter. I noticed that she was thinking about everything that had happened. She no longer questioned my choices the way she once did. Instead, she started asking about my work with genuine interest. One evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I have been thinking about what you told me before. You were right. I only saw the parts of your life that were visible to me. I listened carefully. I thought because you were not following the same path as me, you were not moving forward," she continued. "I never considered that your journey could look different." Her honesty meant more than any apology because it showed that she was finally trying to understand instead of defend her old opinions. I told her that I never wanted her to feel ashamed. Everyone has moments when they misunderstand the people closest to them. What matters is whether they are willing to see beyond their first impression. A few days later, Daniel invited me to a company event where employees and partners would celebrate the progress they had made. When I arrived, I saw how much had changed. People who once had no idea who I was now greeted me with respect. But the moment that stayed with me was when Claire introduced me to several of her colleagues. She did not describe me as someone helping the company. She described me as someone whose perspective had made a difference. It was a small moment, but it showed how far we had both come. The person who once believed I had no future was now standing beside me, recognizing the future I had been quietly building all along. And as I looked around the room, I realized the greatest change was not that others finally saw my value. It was that I no longer needed their approval to know it was there. The weeks that followed showed me that success was not only measured by the results you created, but also by the people who changed because of the journey. The company continued moving forward, and the strategy we developed began creating new opportunities. But what mattered most to me was seeing the change in the people around me. Employees who had once felt uncertain about the future started believing in their own ability again. Leaders who had been focused only on solving immediate problems began thinking about long-term growth. The company was no longer simply reacting to challenges. It was preparing for what came next. Daniel Brooks often reminded me that the greatest improvement was not found in a single decision. It was found in the way people started working together. He told me that the company had always had talented people, but they needed a clearer direction and a renewed sense of confidence. I appreciated hearing that because it confirmed something I had always believed. Good leadership was not about taking credit. It was about helping others recognize their own potential. At home, Claire and I continued having conversations that we had avoided for years. They were not always easy, but they were honest. We talked about our expectations, our fears, and the moments when we stopped truly understanding each other. One evening, Claire asked me a question that surprised me. "Why did you never tell me about all of this before?" I knew exactly what she meant. She wanted to know why I never shared more about my experience, my knowledge, and the opportunities one had been involved with. I thought about the answer before responding. "Because I never wanted my success to become something I used against you," I said. "I never wanted you to feel like you had to compare your achievements with mine." Claire became quiet. I could tell my answer reached a place deeper than the conversation itself. For years, we had both been measuring ourselves in different ways. She measured success through visible achievements and professional recognition. I measured it through preparation, growth, and the value I could create. Neither approach was wrong. We simply forgot that different paths could still lead to meaningful places. A few days later, Daniel invited me to his office to discuss the future. He explained that several partners were interested in expanding their relationship with the company because they trusted the new direction. He also offered me a more permanent role as a strategic advisor. I appreciated the opportunity, but I took time to think about it. I had never wanted a title just to prove something. I wanted my work to have purpose. When I shared the offer with Claire, she smiled. "I think this is the first time I have seen you get recognized for what you have always been capable of." Her words meant a lot because they came from the person whose opinion had mattered most to me. I realized that the hardest part of being underestimated was not the judgment itself. It was feeling unseen by someone you loved. But people can change when they are willing to look deeper. Claire had not become a different person overnight. She had simply started seeing the parts of me that had always been there. And as the company continued building its future, we were also rebuilding something equally important: the understanding between two people who had almost forgotten how to truly see each other. The changes in my life did not happen because one meeting suddenly made everyone respect me. They happened because people slowly began to understand the person behind the quiet decisions and the years of preparation. But the biggest change was not happening inside the company. It was happening between Claire and me. For a long time, we had lived in the same house while seeing completely different versions of each other. She saw someone who was standing still. I saw someone who was trying to build something meaningful without needing attention. We were both looking at the same life from different perspectives. One evening, after dinner, Claire and I sat outside on our back porch. The neighborhood was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, there was no pressure from work, no meetings, and no expectations. It was just the two of us having a real conversation. "Ethan, I owe you an apology," she said. I looked at her and listened. "I spent years thinking I understood you. I thought because you were not chasing the same things I was chasing, you were not trying. I was wrong." Her words were honest, and I could hear that they came from a place of reflection rather than guilt. I told her that I also had things I could have done differently. I had hidden too much of myself because I believed actions would always speak louder than words. But sometimes, the people closest to us need to hear what we are carrying. They need to understand our dreams, our worries, and our reasons for making certain choices. Claire nodded. I think I was so focused on proving myself to everyone else that I forgot to appreciate the person standing beside me. That sentence stayed with me because it explained so much. Success can sometimes make people look outward so much that they forget to look at the relationships that matter most. Over the next few months, our relationship began changing in small but important ways. Claire started asking about my ideas instead of assuming she already knew the answers. I started sharing more instead of keeping everything to myself. We became partners again, not just two people living under the same roof. At the company, Daniel continued involving me in important decisions, but I never forgot the lesson from the beginning of this journey. Recognition feels good, but it should never become the only reason someone believes in themselves. The most valuable confidence comes from knowing who you are before anyone else notices. One afternoon, Claire visited my office for the first time. She looked around at the space, the reports, and the work I had been doing. She smiled and said, "It is strange. I spent so much time thinking you needed to become someone else. But you were already exactly who you needed to be." I smiled because that was the truth I had hoped she would eventually discover. I did not need her to regret her past opinions. I needed her to understand that people are often more complex than what appears on the surface. That night, as we drove home together, I realized something important. The greatest victory was not that her company needed my help. It was not that people finally recognized my abilities. The greatest victory was that the person I loved finally saw me clearly. And sometimes, being truly seen by someone matters more than being recognized by everyone else. Months later, when I looked back at everything that happened, I realized the biggest changes were not the ones people could see. The company had recovered, new opportunities had opened, and my role as a strategic advisor had grown into something I never expected. But the most meaningful transformation was not written in business reports or discussed in executive meetings. It happened in the way people began to understand each other. Daniel Brooks often reminded me that the company succeeded because everyone finally started working toward the same purpose. He told me that the most valuable contribution I made was not a single idea or strategy. It was helping people recognize the strength they already had. That lesson stayed with me because it reflected something much larger than business. Many people spend their lives searching for recognition from others, hoping someone will finally notice their efforts. But the truth is that your value does not begin when someone else discovers it. Your value exists long before anyone else understands it. Claire and I continued building our life together with a different kind of understanding. We still had different opinions. We still approached challenges in different ways. But we learned how to listen instead of assume. We learned that loving someone does not mean you automatically understand everything about them. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones who need the most patience and curiosity. One weekend, we visited the same neighborhood where we had first started our life together. We walked through the streets, remembering the years that had passed and the lessons we had learned. Claire looked at me and smiled. "You know what is interesting?" she said. "I thought I was waiting for you to become successful. But the truth is, you were already successful. I just did not recognize the kind of success you had." Her words made me think about how many people are judged by appearances. Some people measure success by titles, salaries, or public achievements. Others measure it through knowledge, integrity, and the ability to create something meaningful. Neither perspective tells the complete story. A person cannot be fully understood by a single moment or a single impression. Looking back at the night Claire told me she did not believe I had a future, I no longer felt the same pain I once felt. Instead, I saw it as the moment that forced both of us to grow. Without that conversation, maybe we would have continued living beside each other without truly seeing one another. Sometimes difficult moments reveal the things that need to change. They show us where we have stopped listening, where we have made assumptions, and where we need to become better. My journey was never about proving that Claire was wrong. It was never about making anyone feel embarrassed for underestimating me. It was about discovering that quiet confidence does not need constant approval. The greatest reward was not standing in a room full of executives or watching people finally understand my abilities. The greatest reward was coming home to someone who now saw me completely. Because in the end, the future we build is not defined by who believes in us first. It is defined by whether we continue believing in ourselves when nobody else can see what we are capable of yet.